What is the most important thing in Monster Hunter? Knowledge? Skill? Neither of those. The answer is gear. It is the equipment you wear that determines whether you live or die when faced with living natural disasters. But what if, once you pass through the tutorial of low rank, every piece of gear was locked behind a single material? All of your upgrades gate-kept by the only monster that drops that material. Today we'll be talking about that monster. I'm Rainverse and this is Rukodiora, the most important Elder Dragon in Monster Hunter. Frontier. Let me explain. Ruko arrived in Frontier as part of the Frontier Forward expansion, the 11th of 28 expansions, which he was the flagship monster of. This same update also added the terrifying Unknown, who we'll get to in the future. Dubbed the Pole Dragon, Rukodiora's domain is magnetism, and was the first monster to inflict the magnet status effect on hunters, later followed by its subspecies Rukodiora. Along with the magnet status, Ruko also brought its own map to the game, the Interceptor's Fortress, which has an interesting gimmick in that as Ruko destroys the various structures on the map, parts of the area will light on fire and cause the area to turn red as the flames spread. I might be wrong, but I think this is the first time Monster Hunter has even done something like that. Feel free to correct me in the comments, though. Alright, so now that we know a bit about Ruko's backstory, why is he the most important Elder Dragon in Frontier? Well, once you reach HR 5, you get access to Go monsters and their accompanying gear. The gear has an effect called Go Boost, where upon wearing multiple pieces and remaining at a specific health threshold, confers various benefits, not the least of which is 15 extra attack per piece worn when upgraded to Heavenly Storm tier. But what does this have to do with Rukodiora? Every single piece of Go armor requires a single Elder Dragon gem in order to craft it. That means at minimum you are going to need 4 Elder Dragon gems, 5 if you're foregoing an exotic armor piece, for every set you make. Ruko is the only monster in the entire game that drops this item. These gems are so important that devs made a daily quest where you fight Ruko for a guaranteed gem, otherwise it's a 10% chance off a tail carve. Since all Go armor requires Elder Dragon gems, this essentially makes Ruko the gatekeeper of G rank, because you sure as hell aren't making it through HR 5, 6, and the HR 7 Shantian Repel with an HR 4 set. So if you want to use the fun weapons like Tonfas or Magnet Spikes, you better get used to seeing our hard drive wiping friend here. We've gone over Ruko's history briefly and explained why he's so important in Frontier, but in addition to all of that, he's actually got a pretty neat fight. Granted, the novelty of magnets wears off after you get pushed away mid-combo 10 times in one hunt, but it's still pretty good. There are 2 maps you'll mainly be fighting Ruko on, those being the Interceptor base just outside Mesoporta and the desert. The former during most of its normal quests and the latter exclusively for the True Gem Carving daily quest. The fight doesn't differ at all between areas, but the gimmick of the Interceptor base makes the experience significantly more interesting. Ruko's main gimmick is magnetism, which means he'll be pushing and pulling you all throughout the fight to various degrees of effectiveness. In its most basic form, you get pushed away from Ruko when he has blue field up. You'll notice the magnetic status shows up on your hunter as a blue aura, so when he sets up the blue field, you get pushed away because the field is the same polarity as your hunter. On the other hand, for his larger attacks such as this one, Ruko sets up a red field which draws you in constantly until Ruko pulls up debris from the ground in a massive explosion to damage you. At higher ranks, he also drags debris up from the ground to use as projectiles, in addition to the orbiting debris you'll be dealing with throughout the fight. He also has this dragon element beam that I keep reading is magnetic, but I've never seen it pull my hunter during fights, so I don't know about that. Alright, you know what time it is. We need to see if the fit is goated or mid. Personally, I like it, although the female set is kind of cringe, but that's just how Monhun do, so what can you do? Nothing. Normally, I'm not a fan of sets that look like literally my mom's European full plate with shit tacked all over it, but I think it works in this case because of the colors. You have the black and dark gray armor with bright orange spikes and lines for color separation. It looks really slick. If there's one thing I would have changed, it would have been to add Ruko's lightning-shaped horns instead of the feather-looking ones we ended up with. But for an armor set you're probably not going to use for very long, if at all, I think it's fine. But what of the weapons? The weapons are really sick. I don't think there's a single one I don't actually like the look of. Very old gen Elder Dragon vibes. My personal favorite would have to be the longsword and greatsword. Sadly, Ruko does not make anything outside of the default pre-G rank weapon types, so no Tonfas, Switch Axe F, or Magnet Spike. Although Zenith Rukodiora does offer a Magnet Spike, as most Zeniths do. We may not be entirely sure how magnets work, but we can be sure that Rukodiora is a monster. Regardless, thank you for watching, and if you've made it this far, I have a small announcement regarding further content in the immediate future. This will be the last monster spotlight for at least a little while. Frontier monsters gain several new attacks at higher ranks, and I want to be able to show those off. So I'm going to hold back on new spotlights for a bit. Does this mean I'm leaving you high and dry? Of course not. You're stuck with me, whether you like it or not. Next week, the first part of my Frontier progression guide will be dropping, followed by some more discussion-focused videos. Although if I get the itch to do another spotlight, I might turn back to Rise or World. Whatever ends up happening, I've been Rainverse, and I'll be back on my bullshit again next week, whether you like it or not.